All right, welcome, kings and queens. Today we are talking Shanquella Robinson. Consider this commentary a brief follow up from last Friday's interview with Shanquella's legal team. Esquire Sue Ann Robinson came over, spent a lot of time with us going through the intricate details of the case. She discussed the fact finding mission. She also discussed the hesitation, the resistance on the part of the hospital staff in Mexico to allow her access to confirm whether or not the doctor was indeed an employee, but also by the consulate, right? So when we think about prioritization of this case, I don't think we can honestly say Mexico has or is doing everything in its power to ensure justice on the behalf of Shanquella Robinson, right? And if we take a second to step back for just a moment, I remember saying, I don't think the FBI is doing what they need to do. And this was based many months ago on her family's coming out to saying, we've received no updates. And then I shared that I reached out to a source who has some connections to the FBI just to kind of ask about the Shanquella Robinson case. And I'm savvy enough to know that they cannot disclose details. And remember when I shared, he was like, who? What? And many of you felt like, well, there's just so many subsets of the FBI. There's no way each agent would know everything. And I agree with you. You're absolutely correct. But Sue Ann Robinson confirmed what we've been thinking all along over here in the palace. You guys, they've never picked up the case. How about that? Chew on that. The U.S. government has yet to pick up and prioritize the Shanquella Robinson case. And as soon as they do, she shared she believes that justice can and will be served. So there you have it. A bit of resistance on the behalf of Mexico and also a lack of acknowledgement on the behalf of the United States of America. And we know they can move when they want to move because we've seen them move before. So that's one thing I wanted to call out. But why I'm really here today is I wanted to go over two things. I had a lot of questions that I had gathered from you all. Different questions that had come about in the chat throughout the videos that I've released regarding Shanquella Robinson, but specifically some questions that you all asked me to ask Sue Ann directly. Unfortunately, time was not on our side. We ran out of time. And we did not get to those questions. So what I would like to do today is go over some of those questions myself, and then you and I can walk through them as we go along. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is a timeline of death, or pretty damn close to it, based on some things that one of my viewers was able to comb through. I think we may be pretty darn close to the time of death, if not spot on. Let's talk about it. For those of you who are just tuned in, or if you're new to the channel, welcome. I am Queen Sheba. I cover a variety of hot topics specific to reality television, but most importantly, I hone in on the psychological and the behavioral traits of the Black experience. Remember I said a viewer sent in the same report that we've been looking at. But like sometimes you have to look at these things from a different view and a different perspective. So a lot of what I'm going to say you already knew, but there's proof to substantiate it. Okay, that's the first thing. I'm going to go over those three items really quickly, and then I'm going to get into the questions. But let me start off with this. I've asked you before, and I'm going to ask you again. Had we not seen the video of Dejanay Jackson physically assaulting Shanquella Robinson, would you have believed that a woman was capable of issuing those type of injuries Number one, that's included in the autopsy. Number two, before we saw the autopsy, that was included from the just what we knew to float around through social media. Would you have believed that a woman had done that much damage? The reason I'm asking you this is because I said a lot of times when we see things, we lock in on that, right? We're like, okay, I saw the video. It had to have been Dejanay Jackson. I'm not saying that's necessarily the entire truth, because I looked at it and I said to myself, I said, if I hadn't seen that video, there is no way I would have believed that a woman had done this, right? I would have believed exactly what Nazir has been saying the entire time. They all fought her. Check this out. As I'm going through the autopsy, let me put a disclaimer out. I am not a medical doctor. I did deep dive into research. One thing I can tell you and share with you is that Shanquella had multiple injuries, multiple injuries throughout her body that were highly visible before removing her clothes from the autopsy. So you need to be very clear on that. So when Nazir says I did not know, nor was I made aware what had happened to her, even if that were true, the devastation of the trauma that her body, that occurred to her body was visible to the naked eye. So I'm not sure how he could not have seen it because it's in the autopsy report. If you comb through it very, very carefully, it says that all of the trauma, all of the contusions, the bruises, the injuries, he could see it before even removing her clothes. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there was a substantial amount of damage done to her pelvic region. Okay. That's noted in the autopsy report. And you say, okay. So beyond the neck and the spinal injury, that is the cause of death. But there were substantial injuries to her pelvic region. Her hands had defensive wounds. There was damage done to her eyes, on her back, like all of this, which leads me to believe there's some truth in what Nazir has been saying all along. I do not believe that Dejanay Jackson was the only person to physically assault Shanquella. If you look up Shanquella's cause of death and the injury to the spine, it's a very rare injury, and it occurs in most times due to a high impact, like a motorcycle crash or something like that. So whatever was done was very forceful. That's the first thing I wanted to say. But check this out. I want to show you something. If you look at this piece, just a small piece, it says description of external injuries. Direct contusion in the left iliac crest with the hematoma, 7 times 3 centimeters. The injury happened, follow me very closely, more than 12 hours before death. The injury happened more than 12 hours before death. What does that mean? What this means is what I've shown you before. I pulled up the time in Cabo San Lucas on October 29th. And we were able to verify that the sun rose at 7:23 a.m. on October 29th, 2022. If you look at this report, it says that these injuries happened more than 12 hours before death. Either they started beating her earlier in the night, after dinner, or they started immediately after the sun rose. Now, according to the administrator's report, he said that the video he witnessed Dejanay Jackson attacking Shanquella Robinson, that was in the wee hours of the morning. And he could tell because he's extremely familiar with Villa Linda number 32 because of the way the sun was shining in that room, hitting the back of that wall. So we know they went into the morning. I thought, maybe they went, maybe they went about, 45 minutes after they woke up. Y'all, we were being generous. I think they got right up, and I think they had been up. We know they ambushed her. I think she was asleep. And y'all, they went in there no later than 7:30 a.m. because according to the coroner's report, the injuries occurred more than 12 hours before death. So we know that Shanquella Robinson by 8:30 a.m. was no longer with us. Why is that important? Let's go on to the next page. That's important because this now proves that the doctor was not being fully transparent, and I'm being very careful. Basically, she lied. Girl, you lied. Because if this bruise happened more than 12 hours before death, Shanquella, or we can science strongly indicates that Shanquella was gone, ma'am, by the time you got there. And not only that, I think we can say this is factual, that she was gone. Here's why. Take a look at this page. If you go to anterior thorax and xiphoid shows signs of defibrillator burns in a 6x5 centimeter area, and this is the only one with post-mortem characteristics. What does this mean? The doctor utilized an automatic defibrillator on Shanquella, but according to this autopsy report, post-mortem had already set in. Ma'am, she was gone. What were you doing? According to this, she was already gone because this area showed post-mortem characteristics. So that lets us know there's a lot going on with the inconsistencies of the details and the accounts on the behalf of the doctor. And also, according to Sue Ann Robinson, the Red Cross EMTs said, listen, we could have got her to a hospital if she were alive. You get what I'm saying? So that tells me the doctor is not being forthcoming with what really happened in that villa while she was there and when she arrived, and also the condition and or state that she found Shanquella in. And I think that's why a lot of people are strongly believing that there could be some truth to the doctor accepting a bribe with that money that disappeared from Shanquella's suitcase. And also Khalil calling the family asking for $5,000 when it's already been proven by the Red Cross EMTs that there is no money that's needed to transport a patient. And they very well could have transported her. However, being that she was in the condition that she was in, unresponsive, at that point, it was above them. You get what I'm saying? The doctor lied. Shanquella was gone, number one. Number two, she sustained multiple injuries, very severe injuries, and her death was labeled as violent. Number three, the time of death has been established sometime in the wee hours of the morning between 7:23 a.m. and before 8:30 a.m. Okay, I'll start with the first question, and this one came in by Pat Avery. She said, you really touched on some very important chain of events. Can't we find out whose plane arrived first? How did the first two people get there? It should be public record who was on what flight and how many were in the ride to the store, etc., right? You have great points, and I totally agree with the cartel probably owning the villas, and hopefully that will eventually get the harsh punishment that every one of them deserve. Who was the original person that thought of going to Mexico, and who made most of the arrangements and paid for it? How much in advance was this paid for, and how did she have a close relationship with all these people, especially the girls? Was she close friends with any of the girls before this trip? I think her parents substantiated that well in the beginning phases of this case, where her parents substantiated no, she was not friends with any of those girls, not close friends. And her only connection to the Cabo 6 or 7, whoever was there, was Khalil, who many thought to be her best friend. But now we know that to not be true. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay? Because if you were any friend of hers, you would be right there on the behalf and on the side of the family. Okay. So she had no relationship with those girls other than, 6 degrees of separation. All right. Let's start with, can we find out whose plane arrived first? Not really. Let me tell you why. Even though it should be public record, you can look up those flights. The flight numbers and the tail number of the aircraft do not change. Here's the problem. You cannot substantiate anything without a confirmation number. Believe it or not, even if you were to call an airline to look up the passenger manifest, unless you have that confirmation number, they really cannot verify and or validate anything. So can we do it? Yes, you can, but we need some confirmation numbers. That's the only thing that is going to give you real-time factual information about whose plane arrived first, who got there first, and number 2, was there really a delay that day? We don't know because we don't have confirmation numbers. Right now, we're just going on the word of the Cabo 6. And in my opinion, their word is not good for anything. Okay. I don't care if Dejanay told the concierge that she was going to be late. For all we know, they could have been there in Mexico. We don't know anything until we get those confirmation numbers. I think the concierge, and then you said how many were in the ride to the store. We don't, that's a very good question. I caught what you said. How many were on the way to the store? You didn't say to the villa. I don't know. The van driver would be able to substantiate that. But have you noticed how Mexico moves? They're not talking about they're not even letting us know if they interviewed the van driver or the taxi or whoever the transportation company was that picked him up from the airport. They're not giving us any statements from the chef, and they damn sure ain't giving us formal statements from Lucy, the maid, who allegedly found Shanquella about 11 or 12. So we knew Shanquella was gone. I'm getting off topic. So that's why I believe the coroner's report, and I believe what we've been saying all along. They took her life really early. And I wonder if they had been torturing and messing with her. By messing with her, beating her up, beating on her a little bit all night, right? And then in the morning, it was just the final thing. But hopefully I answered your question, and I will go on to the next one. All right, this is a really good question from Deanna. Deanna says, why did the concierge in the village in charge of the Villa Linda 32 and its guests not ask the names of the 2 guests that were in the villa before the rest of the group arrived? The male guest asked the concierge, who was he? It would make sense that both would introduce each other by name, right? The concierge should have contacted Dejanay to inquire about the guests that had arrived early, to verify who they were and whether they were invited guests and part of the group. Also, I find it odd that the chef and the waiter were not questioned about the night they were there preparing and serving dinner. I'm sure both of them saw and heard a lot, which would provide many more details on the group. Oh, absolutely. So from what I gather, as well as you, Deanna, from the report of the concierge, it looks like the waiter and the chef were there first as staff, okay? And the man and the woman who we know the woman, I'm assuming to be Shanquella. The man, we have no idea, okay? Shanquella was not in the caravan with the rest of the group when they came later. He included that in his report. It was Dejanay, Winter, and Elise. And it was 2 other gentlemen. Okay. I think he said one had dreadlocks. And he described one as with a low haircut, I believe. Okay. The other one we can assume was a very talkative gentleman. Very bold. The one that told the concierge, "Who are you?" Right? That's somebody that if Dejanay was the main guest, right? And then a man and a woman arrive before Dejanay, and the man is there, and he didn't plan the trip, and he quote unquote had no knowledge or nothing. You sure are very vocal to be asking these people who they are when you're in their property. Does that make any sense to y'all? If you came in an Airbnb, and if the host, I'm just saying, not all hosts do this, but what if their rules were we greet you when you get here? You're not going to ask people, who are you? What you doing here? That's not the tone you take when you're a guest. So that tells me whomever this person was had some type of confidence and familiarity with, I don't know, maybe Dejanay told him go, but you're exactly right. I question why the concierge didn't take more of an assertive stance to say, I'm so-and-so, and you are, right? The only thing I can think of is there's something strange about this villa, which is I've been saying that since day one. And I think if what we believe to be true about this villa, then you don't ask a lot of questions of the guest. Do you get what I'm saying? Last question, Jim in my eye says, when did they play that card game? Very, very good question. Now, if we go back to the concierge's detailed account, Dejanay was supposed to be there between 3 to 5 p.m., if I'm correct. I think close to 5 or close to 3, she texted the concierge to say, I'm not going to get there until later. And even when she was supposed to be there at 3 something. And she says, I'm not going to get here until 5 something. She got there at 5 something and said, I'm going to go shopping. Okay, just breaking all kind of rules. That man now when you think about the way that villa seems to work, you remember I said it seems like you don't ask your guests questions. And it seems like you roll out the red carpet to your guests and you basically do whatever they need you to do, which is why he feels that he was a victim of Dejanay Jackson, right? Because she withheld valuable information from him and he feels like she manipulated him from start to finish. Okay. And I could probably see in some instances where he feels like he was taken advantage of, especially in this scenario. You late already if you're really late. That's what you telling me, right? But you know what I noticed he did not say? What I noticed is he did not say that he verified that her plane was running late. Do you know when you go to some places international, they want your flight number. They ask you for your flight number. Not all. Some of them do. And for the ones that don't, they'll ask you about a general time range that you'll be arriving. But some do ask you for your flight number. I guess he didn't. He must have just, took her up on face value. She said, I'm going to be running late. And then after she was late, she went shopping. Now, according to his detailed report, Shanquella never showed her face. So that man had to sit in that villa the entire time until they got there. It's almost like working overtime, baby. When they got there, not only were they late, they went in their room. So he's still there, y'all. Then the clock is running and running and running. Then they're doing what they want to do, not adhering to the fact that this man is on his job. And not only is he on his job, but girl, you done bought the chef. And they're waiting for you to come eat. So finally, when he found enough confidence, he let Dejanay know, hey, ma'am, the clock is ticking. If you do not eat, and if the chef has to stay any longer, we are going to charge you extra. To which he said, Dejanay said, basically no. And Dejanay let everybody know they needed to go to the table. In that moment, after everybody arrived at the table. Now, remember, the man had already seen everybody else. He did not see Shanquella, so he knows what Elise looks like, y'all. He's seen her get off the van. He knows what Dejanay looks like. He knows what Winter looks like. He knows what everybody else looks like. He'll never forget. And then he sees Shanquella, the one who was there first, because he knew there was a woman there, and the one who never showed her face to the end. So when some of you are saying, no, that was Elise that came late. No, I'm going to go with him. I believe him. I think Shanquella may have come to the table late, looking a bit off. We've already talked about that. Now, by the time that they started recording and drinking, Elise could have he was gone by then. He was long gone by then. Elise could have very well have left and came back and left and came back and went to the bathroom and all of that. But I'm going to believe his statement for what it was, that Shanquella came late to that dinner table. And based on that, I feel safe in saying that card game did not start until after dinner and they had a few drinks in their system. All right, so today's takeaways are Shanquella passed away sometime in the morning, according to the coroner's report. Number 2, she has substantial injuries. I also believe that for whatever reason, Mexico is protecting their own and they're also protecting their property. I believe there's way more to this story. And in the words of Nazir, is way deeper than what we think.